So I wanted to do a part 2 regarding questions you should be asking before you get married. And in part 2, I want to talk a bit more about what you should be doing, not just questions. Because one of the key things I think also is that we need to understand that we need to be sure we're ready for marriage ourselves. It's not enough to just be vetting the other person, but are you ready for a lifetime commitment? And that is a question only you can answer. Some of the other things you should be doing or questions you should be asking is really trying to play detective. And I know that sounds a bit calculating, but it's necessary that you want to dig into someone's past and see how they've been brought up and see what experiences they've had. And this is the kind of information that really, when you're dating, you should be building up this information gradually by asking questions like, what was your childhood like? Where did you go to school? Who were your best friends? And so on and so forth. This gives you some insight into how the person grew up, what kind of background they had, what kind of challenges they may have come across. The other thing that is useful to do in terms of playing detective is to get to know the person's family and to kind of see how they all interact together. A very clear sign of dysfunction is when someone doesn't have close family relationships, or there are family relationships, but they're very distant, or there's a lot of tension. This doesn't by any mean that there's anything wrong with your potential life partner, but it's useful to know this before you marry them, because they're going to bring this into the marriage. Don't forget that everything about a person comes with them into the marriage, so you need to know what you're getting into. The other thing is about shared values and principles. This is a basic anyway. I think that this is one of the first things you should be doing before once you start dating. You really want to know if the person you're with has shared values and principles. So I don't really think I should be mentioning that, but just in case, make sure that you have shared values and principles. Something else that I wanted to mention is just daily life, how you do daily life. Simple things like hygiene, cleanliness. Do they wake up on time in the morning, or do they sleep in bed all day and then wake up in the middle of the day, or they're sleeping at night? These are all little things, but they irritate you as time goes on. Are they clean? Do they help around the house? What are their views about, assisting with housework or assisting with kids? These are all the things that cause problems as we go on, but many of us don't discuss them before we get married. And hygiene, I mentioned hygiene. Hygiene is really important, because if you have someone that's completely dirty and you're the opposite, that's going to create a problem. Also, things like empathy and compassion and how they treat other people. This is also very important. Now, on to the bigger stuff. The other thing that's important is love languages, intimacy. Those are all things you should be talking about. What is someone's version of being loved? How do they see someone loving them? So you need to know what their own interpretation of love is. If they like being cuddled and you don't think cuddling is important, but they think it's important, then you may need to do more cuddling, right? But you need to know what they think is important, and vice versa, of course. The other thing is really talking to someone about their life vision. How do they see their life? What do they plan to be doing with their life? Do they plan to travel? This is important if you don't want to travel anywhere. If you're the kind that not interested in traveling and they say, well, I want to live abroad for 10 years, then this is an important issue that could cause a problem. The other thing that I mentioned very briefly, but I want to come back to, is how your kids are brought up if you decide to have children. And of course, I've said that already. This is a question you should be asking before you get married. Do you want kids or not? So if you both decided you want kids, you need to find out how they intend to bring up their children. For example, religious background. Do they want to bring them up in a specific religion? Because where you have two parents with different religions, that can be an issue. Where you have parents with different ideas of spirituality, that can be an issue if they intend to force that onto their child, or to ensure that their child grows up with some kind of spirituality, then that could be an issue. The other thing that's very important, but again, I think this is something that you should have dealt with during the dating phase, is past partners. What are their past relationships like? What is their history with their exes? They don't have to get on with all their exes, but someone that keeps saying, oh, it wasn't my fault, it was the other person's fault, never seems to take responsibility for their part in any failed relationship, you need to be careful there. And the last one that I'm going to mention is their general mindset. Someone's general mindset is important, because if you're going to be with them day in, day out, their mindset will affect you. And I've talked in many of my videos about the importance of choosing the right people around us, and what is most important, if not the person you're going to be married to or partnered with for life, potentially. So their general mindset, do they have a negative mindset? Are they someone that sees things in a very negative way? Have they grown up feeling that things never work out for them? Have they given up on life? Those kind of things, if you're not aware of them, once you're married to this person and maybe they don't want to try to do things, or they don't want to go after things, this is going to be frustrating for you. But if you already know that this is their mindset, at least if you still decide to go on with the marriage, you know what you're dealing with. And a lot of this is not about immediately saying, oh, this is a deal breaker. It's about, first of all, making sure that they're ready, making sure that you're ready, making sure that you know what you're getting into, and making sure that if there's potentially any dangerous or harmful situation that you could be going into by getting married to this person, you become aware of it. For example, people that have had abusive relationships, that have been, that have abused their previous partners, doing that detective work is important, because you want to spot that before you get married to them. Because in a lot of situations, what happens is the abuse doesn't start until you're married. So digging into their past, this is why I said their past relationships is very important. Trying to find out information about their past relationships is important. What kind of person are they? Of course, things like checking their criminal record as well, checking that there's no criminal activity that they haven't told you about. Also important if you're going to be married to them. And remember, if someone has debts or loans, or you don't know what's going on in their financial situation, and you marry them, you could become partly responsible for some of their debts. You could be somehow tied into that once you join your assets together. So please do your due diligence before you get married, ideally.